Thank you. Let's try that again. Good evening. My name is Paula Reid, Mayor of Kingborough, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to tonight's council meeting on Monday the 4th of March 2024. Could I particularly welcome the members who are in the public gallery this evening. The time being 5:30 p.m, I now officially declare this meeting open. I wish to advise that council meetings are recorded and made publicly available on our website. Council meetings are also live streamed on YouTube, and in accordance with council's policy, I will ask the Acting General Manager to confirm that the audio recording has started. Thank you. I wish to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land that we're meeting on, pay respects to elders past and present, and also acknowledge today's Tasmanian Aboriginal community. Our attendees this evening are myself, Councillor Reid, the Deputy Mayor, Councillor Gladwright, Councillor Antoli, Councillor Bain, Councillor Cordova, Councillor Fox, Councillor Midgley. We do have Councillor Dean and Councillor Richardson are on their way. They've been delayed in some traffic, so hopefully we will see them shortly. From our staff this evening, we have the Acting General Manager, Mr Smee, Director of Engineering Services, Mr Reeve, our Recreation Officer, Ms Sprott, our Media and Communications Advisor, Ms Adams, and our Executive Assistant, Mrs Morton. We have one apology this evening, and that is from Councillor Street. We're on page 1 of the agenda, confirmation of minutes. The minutes of the open session of council meeting number 3, held on the 19th of February 2024, be confirmed as a true record. I'm looking for a mover and a seconder. I've got a mover in Councillor Fox and a seconder in Councillor Gladwright. All those in favour? Against? Motion is carried. Workshops held since the last council meeting. We had a workshop last Monday evening, the 26th of February, in relation to the parking strategy. Takes us to page 2 and declarations of interest. Does any councillor have a declaration of interest? No, thank you. Is there any item on the agenda that a councillor would like to transfer from closed into open session or open into closed session? No, thank you. And takes us to questions without notice from the public. Does any member of the public who is in the gallery tonight wish to ask a question? If you would like to come up to the lectern, welcome Councillor Richardson. If you'd like to come up to the lectern, if you could start by please stating your name and the suburb in which you live. Thank you.
Through you, Mayor, good evening. My name is Mark Donnellan from Huntingfield.
Sorry, I didn't quite hear your surname.
Donnellan, Donnellon. Okay,
thank you. D-O-N-N, is that correct? D-O-L-L-O-N. E-L-O-N. Double L. Sorry, apologies. It's all right. If it makes you feel any better, nobody can ever spell or say my surname, so thank you.
My question, referring to the Kingborough Place Strategy of 2020, it emphasises reducing traffic volume and speed, including a 30 km/h speed limit, in an effort to create a safer, for the benefit of a change in spatial priority from cars and buses to people, trees and shops, and staying versus moving. Skipping. My question, are there any systems in use that are quantitatively monitoring speed, volume and noise of traffic on the Channel Highway in central Kingston, to better inform the changes that are made to the area and what impact they have on those metrics?
Thank you very much for the question. I'll ask Mr Reeve if he could assist us with that.
Through you, Mayor, we don't have any constant monitoring conditions, but we do have traffic counters that we use from time to time in various different locations there, where we can do point-in-time traffic counts, and we've actually done quite a number of traffic counts along Channel Highway and some of the surrounding streets there for various different reasons at different times. So that gives a pretty good idea in terms of where we might put some new measures in place there and whether that's actually had any effect on the types of traffic, in terms of volume and also type, but also the speed of traffic as well. As for noise monitoring, that's a little bit more difficult. So that tends to be more about the general aesthetics of the area more than anything. And I mean, you can obviously get some noise monitoring equipment there that gives you an idea of exactly what sort of decibels you might be getting in a particular location, but that's probably going to be of little use in terms of the CBD because it's not indifferent to many other sort of built-up areas where you'll have that general noise of traffic in the background there. Is it large enough to warrant or be called a noise nuisance? No, it's not. So it's more to do with the traffic volumes. We do know from the studies we've done in the past for Channel Highway in particular that it is and will remain a through route for traffic. So it's always expected to have a reasonable volume of traffic going through there. That has been modelled with various different scenarios, and it's always come out with the fact that yes, it will continue as a main route for traffic. So we don't expect the numbers of traffic to actually drop off significantly, but we do expect the fact that probably the speed of the traffic there will actually vary, particularly as we've now put in things like a central median. We've obviously got the roundabout at Hutchins Street, and we've got a number of pedestrian crossings as well. So that creates that uncertainty for vehicles there that then leads them to actually slow down as well at the same time. So for future, we'll certainly be doing some future traffic counts in that area as well, so we can make some comparison pre-works that we've done in Channel Highway as compared to what we've actually got now as well. Does that answer your question, or?
That does, yes, thank you.
Thank
may I have
you.
a second question?
Yes, you may.
And what changes and projects are scheduled in the near future, as well as for that are on the cards for the next financial year to reduce traffic volume and noise?
Mr. Reeve.
Through you, Mayor, is this to do with Channel Highway you're talking about, or just generally?
Just the Channel Highway.
Just the Channel
Kingston.
Highway area. Look, there's not any particular ones. There's certainly ones that are actually in the near area, if you like. So, for example, we'll be looking at moving forward with signalising Church Road and Beach Road, where we've had a few issues in that area there. Now, you might think that's unrelated, but all these roads around there are related, so it depends on how traffic chooses to go around the city or go through the city. So that will make some sort of difference in future years for that side of things. There's certainly some other sort of more unrelated type projects which are tied up with some of the message boarding there that talks about, traffic congestion, delays to get into the city and so forth, which is a project not run by council but run by Department of State Growth, but that's still on the cards as well at the same time. And there's other, I guess, sort of unrelated projects which are more to do with active transport in or around the CBD area that we're still pursuing as well at the same time.
Okay, thank you.
Any further questions?
That's all,
no?
thank you.
No further questions from the public gallery. Thank you very much. If questions on notice in the public, at the time the agenda was printed, we didn't have any, but if anyone does wish to submit a question on notice, they can do so by completing the form on our website, or you can also email us at kc@kingborough.tas.gov.au. We're now at questions without notice from councillors. Do any councillors have a question? Councillor Cordova.
Thank you, Ma'am. My question tonight is, for a change, it's about an aquatic centre for Kingborough. And the purpose of my question, well, in the Mercury on the 27th of February, it was reported that both Labor and Liberal have pledged $1.5 million for a Southern Beaches pool project in Dodgers Ferry. My question is, if Sorell has now gained funding commitments for an aquatic centre, why hasn't Kingborough? Is Kingborough Council effectively lobbying for an aquatic centre for our region?
As you would be aware from the state election proposals that I circulated to everyone, I think it was the week before last, for input, funding for an aquatic centre was not within that list at this point in time. We did seek some funding for a feasibility study into a sea pool, and whilst we hear the calls from the community via the Sport and Rec strategy consultation that we just did, in reality, the quantum of funding that we would need from both state and federal governments is probably in the order of around $60 million to complete an aquatic centre in Kingborough. And indeed, with that list that I circulated around, which has a number of other projects on there, such as the expansion of the Kingborough Sports Centre, which is bursting at the seams and lacking capacity for a whole lot of teams, those projects were deemed to be a priority ask of the government, and probably a much more, sorry, I shouldn't just say of the government, of all parties and candidates, and probably more realistic, given that unfortunately Kingborough seems to be overlooked by all parties and candidates when it comes to funding commitments. And at this point of time, there have been no funding commitments provided to the Kingborough area that we would benefit from, whereas other ones have received funding commitments from parties such as Glenorchy for their pool, and other areas, particularly north of the state. So we are regarded by many people in government and many aspiring candidates to be a more wealthy area, and so it is very difficult for Kingborough to get any traction for anything during funding during elections, and that's a great disappointment for the community, and I can assure them it's not for lack of us trying. I have a series of meetings that I'll be having this week with various candidates who have approached me in the hope that I can go through them with them in detail, the proposals that we have put forward, and hope that we can get some engagement for some of those.
Thank you, Mayor. And just to follow up, one question on the aquatic centre side of things. When we do have, so there were overwhelming results from the sports survey that came back from the community saying that really it was an aquatic centre that was a very high priority. My question is there a broad awareness within the state government, and do you think within the other parties as well, about the community's request for an aquatic centre? So I realise it's not on the wish list, but I would hope, can you provide some comfort or assurance that the state government is aware that the community here is indeed clamouring for an aquatic centre?
I think it's fair to say that they are aware, because certainly when we had the previous consultants' report that we considered just under 2 years ago, it made headline news in the Mercury and in the local media. So I think there is an awareness that there are some people in the community, not all, but there are some people who would like to see an aquatic facility. Equally, I have had conversations with ratepayers who, when they understand what an aquatic centre would mean to the increase in rates that would have to be done as a result of the annual losses of running costs, and also the significant impost on depreciation. So all up, we're talking about $1 million impost every year on the on council's budget. There are equally many ratepayers who say, I would not use that. I don't want to have to pay, have 3% more on my rates for a facility that either I would not use, or when I can go 15 minutes up the road to the aquatic centre in Hobart. So there are, whilst that strategy and the consultation did draw out some comments about the pool, there are equally many people who have an alternate view.
Thank you, Mayor.
Any further questions from councillors? Councillor Midgley.
Thank you, Mayor. Just a question about at the last year at KBUC meetings, there's been request for a positive provisioning policy, and it's always been imminent that it's being worked on, and I'm just wondering at all.
Sorry, the word imminent made us all turn and look at
Can
Mr.
that
Reeve.
possibly come to the next KBUC meeting as a draft?
Mr. Reeve, it sounds like it's tailor-made for you, that question.
Through you, Mayor, yes, I know it had been developed to the stage of almost being in a draft stage. I guess my officer, who's off at the moment on paternity leave, there is in his carriage, I suppose, and he's not back for another couple of weeks or so. I'd prefer to probably wait until he is back before where she provided. But I will make sure it's a matter of priority for him to deal with it. Thank you.
Any further questions from councillors? If not, we will continue on. We're still on page 2, questions on notice and councillors. At the time the agenda was printed, there were no questions on notice. Petitions still being actioned. There are no petitions still being actioned. And still on page 2, petitions received in the last period at the time the agenda was compiled. There were no petitions that had been received. That brings us to page 3, Officers' Reports to Council, Twin Ovals Advertising and Signage Policy 4.8, with a recommendation on page 4. I'm looking for a mover and a seconder, please. Don't all jump at once. Moved Councillor Cordover, seconded Councillor Midgley. Councillor Cordover.
Thank you, Mayor. So we're looking at the Kingborough Twin Ovals Advertising and Signage Policy, and essentially it runs us through the policy. I think it's good, and I also there's a couple of points that I wanted to point out around the perception of when advertising is provided. It's a benefit to the operators, the people who are using the club, or who are using the facility. But I think it's really important, just as a matter of, ideology, that we recognise the significant contribution that council makes to maintaining and providing these facilities as well. So I did want to point out some of the various provisions within it. So, for example, at 6.1.1, it's important to note that there are still installation conditions. So, building permits and things like that may be required. Broadly, the review into this Twin Ovals advertising and signage policy has been undertaken, and it's considered that the document is still relevant, and it will be until the foreseeable future. There will be another review of it coming up shortly. I did have a question around so the Kingborough Council maintains the naming rights for the pavilion, and also that no advertising naming rights shall be issued for the function centre. So I'm looking at 5.2.2 and 5.2.3. And then there was one around that on the playing field, so 5.3.4, no advertising signage shall be painted or erected on the playing surface without the prior approval of council. I just had a question around that. Does that mean that sometimes it will be allowed, and under what circumstances, and what kinds of things will be allowed to be on the playing surface?
Mr. Smee.
Through you, Mayor. For example, when we had an AFL pre-season match played at the venue, there was a requirement for the sponsor of that competition to have on-ground signage painted on the ground. So that's an example of that. You may have a situation where the tenant club wishes to have a sponsor logo painted on the ground. They would need to seek approval from council before doing that. And in reality, the signage on the ground is done by council staff. So, they're the examples of where that would apply.
Thank you. And through you, Mayor, just one more question around. So we can see here that under the procedure, the policy detail, so we're looking at page 6, broadly, Kingborough Council does have the capacity, to lean in and govern. So I'm looking specifically at 5.1.5 standards. No advertising or signage will be permitted that could be considered offensive, discriminatory or contrary to the values of Kingborough Council. So the reason I circled that one is I have a particular predilection for making sure that, particularly when there's young athletes involved, that we're not promoting things that are harmful and things that are bad for community health and well-being. And I just wanted to tease out, if I can, what some of those things might be that would fall under the catch-all of not considered to be contrary, or the things that would be contrary to the values of Kingborough Council. I'm thinking specifically around things like alcohol, things like gambling, and but also sugary drinks and things like that, fast food. I'm just interested to hear what the council considers contrary to their values.
Mr. Smee.
Through you, Mayor. some of the things you have mentioned. I mean, some of those things are prohibited by law, so not something that council needs to regulate. In essence, when we receive a request, if there was any question as to whether it may or may not contradict our values, we would put that to council for determination. But I think some things are quite cut and dry in relation to, you know, gambling, for example, is something that you know, this council has made some strong statements on in the past, and would be contrary to our values to have that promoted at our venue. So, but as I say, if in doubt, staff would put it to council for determination.
Thank you.
Councillor Cordova.
Thank you, Mayor. And so would that include sugary drinks or fast food outlets? Or no determination's been made as yet? I could be opening a can
Mr.
of...
Smee, I think it would be opening not a can of soda, but a can of words.
Yeah.
Through you, Mayor, look, if you look at what our values are, then I'm not sure that there is an obvious clash with our values in relation to sugary drinks and fast food, but certainly if that's been flagged by council as something that they'd want a discussion on, as I say, if in doubt, we'll put the matter to council.
Thank you. And just to conclude my remarks, Mayor, I do think that the policy is good, and because it does have some of that broad language which actually allows council the autonomy to make decisions around what can sometimes be a sensitive issue. And I'll just conclude by, I guess, reiterating that it is council that puts in so much money into maintaining and keeping and creating these opportunities for the community. And I'm a great, I was about to say I'm a great participant. I'm not a great participant, but I am a participant in sport, and I'm a great believer in the health and wellbeing benefits of community sport, not just the physical benefits, but the mental health and wellbeing benefits as well. So I think it's terrific that we have that, and I do understand the need to supplement income by having advertising, but I just want to maintain that refrain that it really is the Kingborough Council that's providing these opportunities. And so sometimes I think it's a bit misleading when you see, you know, Blundstone Arena. It wasn't Blundstone that built that arena, for example. And so I just think we need to remember that we should be proud as a council of the sports and recreation opportunities we provide, and we should market that pride and let people know that it was the council that did it, and it wasn't individual brands that did it. Thanks very much. I commend the motion.
Thank you, Councillor Cordova. Councillor Fox.
I had wanted to raise the matter of alcohol advertisements, and I do know that in the past we had a policy that council would not, that council would not advertise tobacco on any council property, but I know that in the recent years, since Mr. Smee's been working with us, that we've had trouble getting confirmation of that situation for legal reasons, and I'm wondering, in this situation with the sports centre, can we insist as being that tobacco and related products are contrary to the values of Kingborough Council, or does that not fall under that heading?
Mr. Smee.
Through you, Mayor, my understanding is that advertising of tobacco products at sports grounds is prohibited under law, so it's not something that council need to deal with.
Any further discussion? Councillor Cordova, I suspect you don't need to sum up. No, thank you. I will put the recommendation. It's moved by Councillor Cordova, seconded by Councillor Midgley. All those in favour? Against? Motion is carried unanimously. Takes us to page 9, Draft Kingborough Tracks and Trails Strategic Action Plan with a recommendation on page 10. I've got a mover in Councillor Midgley and a seconder in Councillor Fox. Councillor Midgley.
Thanks, Mayor. I'm very happy to move this excellent draft strategy, and I thank staff for all the work in putting it together. I guess it's just firstly important to note that once this item is approved by council, it will go out for public consultation as noted on page 7 of the report. It outlines a range of tracks and trails, statistics and information, but I guess in real summary, Kingborough residents love our tracks and trails in Kingborough. That was highlighted by things we see recently, like the fantastic Kingborough Council Facebook pages. Like, I think there's some of the most liked kind of things that the community comments on and shares and all that kind of things, and tags friends. We look at, COVID, how much the tracks and trails across Kingborough were so well loved and so important for our health and well-being and bit of community connection when you can walk with a friend. I think it was here, can't remember now. And also in our recent consultation we did around the sport and recreation strategy, again, the recommendations and the community feedback about the tracks and trails in there as well, the cycling links and how important they are for our community. The opening of the Northwest Bay Track has been so popular. People are, going out all the time and sharing and enjoying that experience. And I guess that strategy gives, this strategy gives an outline for future projects, strategic directions, and also guidance and best practice. And so going out to the community, we will, I guess it's a real test really to sort of see if we're on the right track, if the community considers some of these tracks and trails are still being important as a strategic direction. And I guess things that have been on the bench for a little while around the Woodbridge Foreshore Trail, like we know that that's loved, so it'd be great to get some feedback on that. It also correlates like with the cycling strategy as well. We know how important those active links are in our tracks and trails for enabling people to be moving about in active transport, which has so many health benefits, as well as bringing cars off the road. So it's a great aspirational document, provides direction. When we have elections coming up, it's another document we can talk to our prospective candidates about projects moving forward. Any other, I've heard from the cycling strategy, because we have this strategy in place, it means we can apply for grants, noting that we've got this information in the strategy. So it's also important for that. I do note there, like there's millions of dollars of projects, and it enables us to sort of not be, we can do all of them, but it gives us strategic direction, helps us in our budget deliberations, and we can chip away at them kind of over the years as well. So I'm sure, hopefully, we'll all say yep to this going out to the public for comment. And I guess if we can just have a little bit maybe around, just a question, Mayor, around what does that consultation look like, noting that it's sort of for 6 weeks, but how are we going to ensure that everyone from Bruny Island to Gordon to Roona kind of gets a comment and has a say?
Ms Sprott, would you like to talk to us about the community engagement, please?
Through you, Mayor. So we're going to go, normally most of our consultations go out for a period of 4 weeks. So this one we're going for 6 weeks, just to give it a little bit longer, because I realise that we're in the middle of it with an election and there might be people get sidetracked. The plan through our media and comms department is that it will go through our normal social media posts and articles in the local papers, and then I'll be also sending it out and the links to some of our active community groups who I know are involved with walking and tracks and trails, and just trying to get the word out as far as we can.
Thank you. Further contributions? Councillor Fox and then Councillor Cordova.
Oh, just looking at this document, I'm just amazed how far we've come as a council in terms of tracks and trails, and the way it's laid out, the beautiful photographs, the description of the tracks, what the priorities are. It's a fantastic job and a beautiful document, and I recommend people have a good thorough look at it and come up with any ideas or shortfalls that they feel we could address. And I'd like to congratulate staff on doing such a wonderful job. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Fox. Councillor Cordova.
Thank you, Mayor. I would like to echo that sentiment, that thank you so much for all the work that's gone into it, and it is remarkable to see how far we've come as a council. And it behoves us to mention also the significant number of people in the community who have registered there, who have basically said recreational walking and hiking, this is something that we like to do, it's our priority, particularly in the wake of the pandemic, and as a result of the pandemic, people love to get outdoors and walk. My first questions are around, so once upon a time, back in 2006, the Kingborough Tracks and Trails Forum was held, and then there were these 200 ideas that came out of that, and they were compiled, and then they were analysed, prioritised, and that resulted in 50 tracks and trails links of various proposed use, achievability and priority identified and mapped. My question is, are we ready for another forum? Are those 200 lists still relevant? Will will a time come where it's useful to have another community forum like that to get more ideas, or just some general commentary around that?
Ms Sprott.
Through you, Mayor, we got such a comprehensive list, and this was before my time. It was when Councillor Fox was driving that on the Tracks Advisory Committee at the time. So that original 200 that got filtered down to the 50, and that's, I guess, when I came in along, when we revised this in 2017. And looking back then, I think even since 2017, things have changed a lot with what the public and what we're hearing people are wanting. And that's why I have kept in here, we've kept some of those sort of aspirational, big linkage, regional trail type tracks which often pop up, but realistically they're hugely expensive. You've got to get so many landowners and ducks lined up to fund. They'd usually be needing federal big dollar funding. So at the moment, to answer your question, if we were to go back out, we would have so much more coming, which we're struggling to even get funding. So as you've probably sat through the budget workshop this morning, you know, we've got one new trail in for stage 2 for North West Bay River, and the other projects we've got in are just maintenance upgrades of the trails we've got, just to keep bringing them up to a contemporary and sustainable standard, so that our maintenance is not so high, and bring that to a safer standard. So if things change, I think financially into the future, or if there are big grant rounds opening up for tracks and trails, then that might be and it might be a time to go back out and just address what people want. But I'm also seeing that by going out, and we're keeping this as a very open-ended, like I haven't done it as a survey, we've just kept it as a really open-ended feedback, and I know most of that feedback is going to be coming in looking at that priority 1, 2 and 3 lists, and out of that is where we're hoping to see where people might be, you know, if we're getting feedback from lots of people, yes, this is what we really want, this is what we want to be able to hear, because, you know, it might be on our list, but we might not think it's a higher priority. But if we're hearing from the public and those communities, that to them, and especially our communities that are further out, that's an important trail network for them, then that's what helps boost that up. And also just to let you know that sort of back end of this document, so I see the front end of it is more the strategic direction, it's best practice, what we should be aiming for. The back end is more of a working document that we update over time. So as a trail gets built, I move it into the appendice as that gets done. If we put more signage in or infrastructure in those appendices in the back, I update that. It's more as a working document. So if I'm hearing from community groups saying, hey, we really want this at Woodbridge or Kettering, wherever it may be, can you get that into that list? Then that's what we're trying to do, is getting that slotted in. So I'm hoping from this engagement that we go out to, is a chance for community to give some feedback, and then potentially in the future another forum. But I just think until we have the capacity to be able to respond, I think we've just got to keep the expectations that we want to see where the priorities are for people, and we're also hearing in the last, since COVID particularly, those networks, connecting links, which people can also use for active transport as well as just every day-to-day exercise and walking with the dogs and kids, are really important to people. So I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. And through you, Mayor, particularly on that Northwest Bay, the trail there is fantastic. I've jogged up and down there a number of times, and it's so beautiful, and it's a great community asset. Your response, through you, Mayor, the response led me to ask about, is there utility in having a special committee, as there was back in the day? I understand that there was a Tracks and Trails committee, similar to how we have an access committee now and a safety committee. Is there utility in having that in modern times, or it's no longer necessary to reinstate a Tracks and Trails committee?
I think we've discussed this previously, and I think the issue was that when there was the previous committee, there wasn't a dedicated staff member who was driving the development of our network of tracks and trails. And so since we're able to employ one, that sort of superseded the need for a committee structure, because the committee structures were also then bringing in other staff resources. So that's why we started to economise, if you like, in terms of what committees that we do have on council.
Sure, thank you. And then through you, Mayor, just one more question. I just wanted to make the point that I also see that there's some economic benefit that will arise from our great network of tracks and trails through ecotourism and people being attracted to the Kingborough region, not just as tourists, although I think there is a tourism benefit there, but also it's a major attractor for investment and people to move here, and we're one of the great places, I believe, to live and to work and to engage in recreation. So I think there's that aspect of it as well. My question was around Cayuta and the proposal for the Cayuta tramway track. I'm looking now at page 31 of the report, page 43 of our agenda. Around the 2023 commentary says that extension from Lawless Road, and it goes on, that requires a feasibility report. My question around that, because there was a very brief discussion around it previously, what does that Cayuta tramway track extension look like? What is the feasibility study for which area is it looking at, and what's the intended outcome of all that?
Ms. Sprott.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor. Yes, so it's one way to look on a map and join the dots of where we think we want connectivity to go. And then to go out in ground truth, it obviously shows us something completely different. This section is, it's a really old historic section of the Cayuta tramway track, which had been there in existence for a very long time, which was from quite high up on Narina Road to connect through to that five ways where the Cayuta tramway track starts.
Yep.
I used to live in the area, and we used to go out there many, many years ago when you could get through, but there were broken down bridges and you have to walk down into deep gullies and climb back out again. We went and had a look at that only recently in the last 6 months and met with a landowner who it runs alongside just to go ground truth it, because it was something always really keen to get in to add to that network. Would be great to have. And it's just a beautiful, beautiful part in there, and huge big trees. It's almost rainforest. It's a wet sclerophyll rainforest, huge big trees, and fallen down trees. And it would require to bring it up to the standard of the rest of the Cayuta tramway, it would require 2 bridges over 2 washed out gullies. And then there was also another big section of a washed out, sort of an erosion pit about half the size of this circular area here, and it was quite deep, with large trees either side. So to be able to route a track around there, it just wouldn't be feasible without putting a bridge, which would make 3 bridges. Due to the remoteness, they'd need to be helicoptered in, and you're in a really big, tall, rainforesty area. So the reason that we've put that, it would be, so it basically showed us, this would be amazing, but wow, it's just going to be so expensive. It would be over $1 million, to do. But we didn't want to rule it out of the 5-year plan because it's still seen as it would be a great link to have in the future. It was kept in here to maybe do a feasibility report to fully cost that out, and also probably look at the sort of environmental impacts that would have as well with the species in there, and maybe to get some rough costings. But having just recently, we've just recently replaced 2 bridges on the Narina Creek track, which got helicoptered in, and they were over $100,000 each. So just as a ballpark figure in today's terms of what that costs, at $100,000 for 1 bridge. So there's 3 at $300,000. That's before we've done any other work. So yeah, it would be great, but we kind of thought it might be something that could be like a federally funded project one day along the historic sort of tramway lines. So we don't want to rule it out, because if we ruled this out and crossed it out completely, a lot of the community would be jumping down our necks to say, hey, why have you taken it out? But having gone in and ground truthed and walked it, and there is a rough pad you can get through, but there's certainly climbing up and over huge big logs. So keeping it in there for now.
Thank you, that's good to know. So through you, Mayor, if I may, just there was one more question, and then I'll be done. My question is around, so I'm aware that in England, in a lot of places, maybe most places, that you can access land without having to use paths. You can ramble across open access land and the like. And I understand that occasionally, for example, I can see on page 35 of the report, when it talks about the Allens Rivulet section, it says it requires landowner support. So I'm aware that occasionally landowners are maybe a bit more reticent. Some landowners are more reticent than others to engage with getting shared paths and tracks and trails. What engagement do we do, or what maybe education do we undertake with landowners to help them see the benefits of tracks and trails, where there are landowners who are maybe not as enthusiastic as others? Basically, my question is, what are we doing to assess and identify the barriers for some people? Some people have fear around too many people crossing in front of their land, and those kind of barriers. What are those barriers? What are we doing to remove those barriers? And do we promote the community benefits to landowners?
I think it's fair to say we do certainly promote the community benefits to landowners, and particularly where there are trails where there's just a small section that's required of private property to link up a couple of areas. It's very frustrating when the landowners don't give consent to that, but I'm sure Ms Sprott can give us some more examples. Thank you.
Through you, Mayor. Yes, a good question. So what we've done in the past, when we've got a landowner who has a link, an important link, which is a missing link, which is on their property, and this example is a recent landowner as well, so they're probably not ready to leap out and give up their land, and so we had written, but the approach we've used in the past previously is that we use our Trail Riders Action Club, which is our lobby group called TRAC, who generally approach landowners at a more community level, as opposed to us as the sort of the bureaucracy of council saying, hey, we'd really like this little bit of land for these strategic links. So TRAC have been great for that in the past of advocating, and they write letters or they go on site and meet people and they talk it through how crucial those links are and why if they could just get that little 100 metres here, it means you wouldn't have to ride your horse along this, narrow bit of road. And that has worked in some instances. You'll probably be aware, I think it was last year, that TRAC put up a report, to council for 4 crucial missing links they really wanted us to follow up on, which I've identified in here, and we've put the work in, and out of those 4 we've got 2. So normally in the past after TRAC, if they've approached a landowner, if that landowner says straight away, no, not interested, bugger off, leave us alone, then we wouldn't go and do anything further. Doing compulsory acquisition is not a preferred method. It causes too much angst for everyone, and especially when we're talking about a really small link which is going to benefit 20 or 30 people in an area. It's probably not worth going through that sort of angst unless it was really, really, really crucial. So to answer your question, in the past we've used that as a community group, and they usually often know people in that area. They use their members who are in those sort of more rural areas to talk to the landowners. And then they then approach us as officers, and then we would go out on site and meet with the landowners. We'd have a few of us involved and just listen to what their issues are. And often if it's around things like they're worried about liability or safety or lack of privacy or vandalism, we can use examples of where we have opened up tracks and it's been an advantage to someone to have a recreational trail out their back gate. And we've had some great examples of where we've done that and had opposition early on to a project, got through it, got the project, and next minute the landowner's riding their bike up down there every day saying how wonderful it is. So that's about as far as we've gone, apart from also just going through this process as well. So
that's great, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Cordover, anything further?
That's all. To conclude, Mayor, I think that the report itself is very good. The 7 principles, it's very good. And I just wanted to extend, in addition to my thanks to the author and the authoriser and all the work of council staff, I also wanted to, I guess, shout out the Kingborough's land care, bush care and coast care groups and the broader community who use our tracks and trails and love them, because it really is, it's a very positive thing that we have in our community to have these natural and cultural assets that we can enjoy, and I think it helps us all, and I'm really appreciative of all the work that goes into maintaining and creating more of them. So thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Bain.
Thank you, Mayor. Just briefly echo everything that the previous councillor has said. It's an excellent action plan and look forward to seeing the feedback come back from the community. I thought it's just worthwhile drawing attention to, I think it's page 41 in the report, page 53 on the council papers, the completed track projects since 2017. There's stacks of tracks on there, some of them quite major, so I think it just goes to show the excellent work that we've done over the past few years in this area. And to go with that, a lot of these have been grant funded as well, so you've had staff completing the projects and getting some money to put towards it to make it stretch further. So I think it's well worth a pat on the back, and we've seen in the recent survey how much the Kingborough community enjoys walking these tracks, so definitely credit to them. Job well done.
Thank you, Councillor Bain. Any further discussion? Very briefly, I just wanted to add some comments and just say I think we're very, very fortunate in Kingborough that we have such a significant network of tracks and trails across the municipality, because as we know, there are a whole range of benefits from us having those, particularly I think there are health benefits for our community, not just physical health but mental health benefits. There's obviously economic benefits and community and social benefits, and as we've already said, COVID really sort of showed to us, I think, how important local tracks and trails are, and the ability, if you're in a situation where you can only exercise within 5 kilometres of your property, that we have a really good network of tracks and trails. So I do feel like we are in the fortunate situation of being ahead of a lot of the other municipalities in the state and cities with what we've got on offer. And it's interesting that we know that recreational walking is the #1 activity for residents of Kingborough, and bushwalking is #5. So that goes to show, I think, how popular the tracks and trails are. So thank you to our staff for their work on this document. I suspect that we'll have a lot of community engagement about it. And, you know, maybe, you never know, some of those private landowners who are a little bit hesitant to unlock their land to help us fill in some of the missing links, maybe while we're going through this process of engagement, they might actually look at how enthusiastic the community are, read the document, and it might help to get them over the line. It'd be great if it did, because I think, you know, there are those missing links that we'd like to progress. So that the community can enjoy more of these areas. So thank you very much. Thank you to all councillors for their comments. Councillor Midgley, would you like to sum up? No? All right, I'm going to put the recommendation. It's moved by Councillor Midgley and seconded by Councillor Fox. All those in favour? Aye. Against? Motion is carried. It takes us to page 52, appendices. Does any councillor have a question on any of the appendices? Oh, sorry. Yeah, of course. Sorry. A mover in Councillor Midgley and a seconder in Councillor Gladeright. Any questions on the appendices? Councillor Antoli.
Thank you. Mayor, I note that on the 19th of January, I believe it was yourself that met with PMAT about the DAPs and concerns that they may have about the state government taking control away from councils with those DAPs. Have you got can you give a summary on what maybe their concerns are and how valid they are from our point of view, the council's point of view?
Look, the PMAT have a range of concerns around the DAPs, particularly around what I guess the lack of detail that has been provided to date by the state government. So when they made the announcement, it came as there'd been no prior consultation with local governments. So it was very much a surprise and insignificant, I think, detail given the magnitude of the proposal. PMAT have concerns about what the makeup of the panel would be, what the qualifications of the experts would be. They also have significant concerns around the timeframes. So we had quite a lengthy discussion about the timeframes, because if you recall, when we, as a council, considered our submission to the state government in relation to this proposal, there was some information there that from what we know about the DAPs at the moment, compared to our own processes that we go through for approvals of development applications, with what they've got outlined, potentially a project that goes through the DAP could take up to 102 days to be assessed, which is significantly more than our council processes. That's a rough estimate based on the information that we've been provided with. So they are certainly, PMAT have been in discussions with the state government about this and put a submission in themselves. I did indicate that we would seek to provide council's view to members of the Labor Party. And of course, this conversation took place before the election was announced, and we had trouble finding a date in which their shadow minister for planning was available. So I just checked in my diary earlier, and it's actually for the Monday after the election, which is of no use. So I will try and revisit that and send them a copy of council's submission so that they've got the information.
Thank you. And my only other question is around your meeting on the 29th of January with, I believe, representatives from Leslie Vale about the Leslie Road intersection issues with the Hazel Brothers Quarry.
Yes.
Is it true that Hazel Brothers are not wanting to negotiate on any of that?
I have a further meeting about this on Wednesday of this week. There is a great deal of concern from residents in the area about the quarry expansion of the operating hours, and there are a range of associated issues that are causing concern to residents. It was a whole series of things. It's not just about the expansion of the hours, but it's also things like where the trucks that are coming to the quarry are pulling up in Leslie Road and sitting there waiting for the quarry to open, making noise outside one of the residences. The drivers then get up, and if they need to, they don't have a toilet, so they go sort of on the side of the road, which is causing concerns to the residents as well as the issues around that intersection, which we continue to work with the state government on. So my understanding from those residents that I spoke to, they were certainly frustrated by the response from the quarry owners. And similarly, there's been a community group that is now formed, which is specifically made up of a group of residents from the area who are very concerned about the traffic issues. And the quarry owners seem to think that it's not a problem at all. That's certainly not the experience of a lot of the residents. So this is one of those frustrating ones where the traffic issues are falling to the state government to try and resolve. But the residents, I think, quite rightly are concerned about what may occur at that intersection if you've got a lot more trucks turning.
Is it possible, Mayor, that the council could be a mediator in all of this to invite all the parties, including State Growth, to some sort of a meeting on council properties to try and resolve this?
So Mr. Reeve was at the meeting with me, and we did run through a number of things that we had hoped to discuss with State Growth, and I think he went and did make some representations to them on a number of the issues. I don't know whether you'd like to give an update on that, because I haven't touched base with you about it since then as a starting point, and then we'll go to that. Mr. Reeve.
Through you, Mayor. Look, we've had a number of discussions with State Growth over a period of time, in particular about this matter, and certainly reached out to them after that meeting that we actually had with residents. I guess what we're reaching out with them about is primarily to do with their highway and potentially putting in some signage there, particularly with air brakes and bits and pieces like that. They're probably a little bit less willing to do that. I guess we're still having that conversation with them at an officer level. And I guess when we get a solid answer back from them confirming yay or nay, then I guess that'll be a question of whether or not we want to use any other political means to actually effectively move that along a little bit further. So they, I guess at an officer level, they just look at it from a consistency point of view in terms of, where you might actually put that. So typically that for things like that, signage like that, is for built-up areas. So they, I guess they've got a slightly different viewpoint in terms of that particular intersection. I guess some of the other matters there that was raised by the Mayor, I think it's fair to say that the quarry itself are quite open to be having discussions about various different things. So we have set up some times to actually meet with them, hopefully to actually deal with particularly some of those issues with some of the large gravel lay-by areas at the moment there that's probably being misused slightly. So there is things happening in that space. So I guess it's a question of just wait and see where we get to in terms of I guess, our interactions at an officer level, and then decide whether or not we want to do some further advocating from a political level.
And when we had this meeting, it was actually prior to the election being called, because my advice had been, look, I can see a whole sort of public advocacy campaign around this to try and get some attention, because letters to the Minister for Infrastructure have just really not provided satisfactory responses to the residents, because it's clearly a dangerous intersection as it is. Add a whole stack more trucks to it, and it's going to become, you know, even more difficult. And I think that the residents can see it, and it's frustrating, and I share their frustration. So, yeah, if we don't get any traction on this, I think I'd be recommending to the group when I see them on Wednesday that they really start a public campaign about it, because it seems nobody's listening otherwise.
I'd like to be able to offer my services to maybe see if we can get some attraction from state growth, but this really should be a part and above and beyond politics, because state growth is a bureaucracy, and it's not run by one minister. There are a whole bunch of operational leaders that should be doing their job underneath the minister. It shouldn't be up to one person to be making these level of decisions, and I can't accept that stasis until March the 23rd is a reasonable response from state growth. All the ministers are in caretaker mode, so who's looking after, where's the SEC and the DepSec of state growth?
And that's where Mr Reeve indicated that we've tried to reach out to the officers who are dealing with this at the moment to try and get some traction on the issues. If that's not successful, then we do need to up the ante and put it out in the public arena of, you know, this is something that needs to be solved.
Okay.
But I appreciate your offer to assist, and I'll certainly, anyone who wants to help lobby for that, very keen to take you all up on that.
I'll talk to you offline then, thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Dean and then Councillor Cordova.
Yeah, just two questions from me. The first relates to the use of the Kingborough Sports Centre by the Jack Jumpers. There's two meetings, the 19th of Jan and the 21st of Feb. Just fortuitously met with a few people from the local pickleball community, and they had their championships over the weekend, and obviously it's a constant situation. We've got limited courts, and the Jack Jumpers obviously been fantastic. So could we just get an update on where we're looking at, if there's been any update in terms of their usage? Has it increased in this next year moving forward?
So the Jack Jumpers usage hasn't increased, it's stayed the same as it has when they initially started training at the Kingborough Sports Centre 2.5 years ago. And they mainly train on, it's morning, so it's the quiet time when it's not sort of, the courts aren't used for other purposes during that time. The amount of time that they have access to the courts hasn't increased. But they have had to extend their lease with us at the Sports Centre because they don't have a high performance centre as yet, which was promised to them by the state government when the team was formed. That is creating some concern for their management and for their owner, because it's not the sort of facility, you know, whilst they're very happy and grateful to be there, it is not the sort of facility that they would expect an elite level basketball team to be training in permanently, and they believe it does have some impact on their ability to attract some of the high level import players, and could do in subsequent years. Yeah, look, you will be aware that one of the state election proposals is that we have an expansion of the Kingborough Sports Centre and have 2 additional indoor multi-use courts located there. Thinking back a couple of years ago, we did have a plan to have a more significant rebuild at the centre and add on 4 additional courts, and change the access for the gym and change the front access, and it was all part of the big master plan that we had for the precinct. And we did try and get funding from that during the last federal election, but it was a $28 million project, and there was 20 million given to Devonport for a lovely sports centre up there, and we received nothing down here, which was disappointing, because we do know that we're increasingly a regional facility there at the sports centre. People aren't just coming from Kingborough to use it. Gymnastics are getting people from all over the southern region, the Eastern Shore. We have teams that are coming from as far as sort of Newtown and as well as the Huon Valley and Channel. So we desperately need 2 more courts there at the sports centre, just to satisfy the demand, and also for, as you've just mentioned, pickleball, the new sports that are emerging, because I know that they could put far more teams together in the competition if we had the space to accommodate them, which at the moment, unfortunately, we don't.
True. Thank you. And just the last question around the 31st of Jan meeting with representatives of state growth regarding feedback on the AFL High Performance Centre bid. I know you've spoken about previously that the feedback has been somewhat, I don't want to use your words, so I'm going to say inadequate potentially. Given that you've had that meeting, was there anything that you've learnt new that came out in terms of our bid?
Well, pleasingly, they did indicate that the submission that they received was of a very high standard from us. Without sounding arrogant, we knew that already, because the work that our staff did on it was certainly, we know it ticked all the boxes. It seems that probably, I guess, the feedback that came from that meeting was, my take home was that one of the deciding factors was that we just weren't close enough to the airport, which is a geographical fact that we can't deny. That's a little frustrating because our reading of the selection criteria just talked about the proximity to infrastructure and transport. It didn't actually name an airport. And I think the other thing that we had some discussion about, and that I did express disappointment about, was the fact that the timeframes that we had been given, which were very, very tight, and would have seen us delivering the oval by, is it October 2025? Yep, October 2025, was subsequently moved out for clearance to 2026, well into 2026, because of the construction challenges that they had. So I did express my strong disappointment that we were able to deliver the project in a much shorter time frame, which was more suitable to that preferred by the AFL, and ultimately they made the choice about the proximity to the airport over when the oval could be delivered. So we just had to agree to disagree on that one.
And I guess just lastly, as part of that discussion, was there any comment around what may happen if those timelines aren't met by Clarence in their bid?
So there are still some processes to go through at Clarence. They need to rezone their area, which we didn't need to do. And then, of course, they've got those, they then, after rezoning, would have to also, or prior to rezoning, sign a heads of agreement with the state government for the delivery of the project. I'm not aware whether we've had any update on whether that has occurred or not. Mr. Smee's indicating no. We made it very clear that in the event that either rezoning couldn't take place or they couldn't reach a heads of agreement with Clarence City Council, that we would be more than willing for them to come back to us and engage with us, and we would enter into negotiations with them. I think that if that was the case, we'd probably be quite harsh in our negotiations and leverage that situation to our own advantage, like one would expect. But certainly that was a question that we discussed, and I said we still remain interested in hosting it, and if they would, need to reach out to us, then they certainly can. There was also discussion about the availability of the twin ovals in the event that it does get built at Clarence, but the timelines get significantly longer than they have indicated that they could have it up and running with. And obviously that's a conversation we would need to have with the teams that are currently based at the Twin Ovals, because we don't want to be used for turfing them out at a time, just because they haven't been able to deliver over on the Eastern Shore. So I hope for their sake they are able to deliver it as promised, because it could have a whole range of implications otherwise. Further questions? Councillor Cordova.
Thank you, Mayor. Briefly on the jack jumpers thing, my question is about the engagement with the other 32 sports and making sure that, my question is, can you provide some comfort that the other 32 sports are actually getting the correct level of engagement, so that it's not seen that we're just favouring, with our, for example, state election wish list, that we're not favouring some sports over others with respect to, not every sport has a lobbyist that can help them win big extensions to the sports centre. Are we making sure that the other sports are on board with Kingborough Council's plans for the sports centre and are being fairly treated, so that the jack jumpers don't just get everything, even though I'm a huge fan of the jack jumpers?
So there's no link between the jack jumpers and the two courts that we're proposing. You've misunderstood that, because the jack jumpers have their court availability and are only going to be with us temporarily until the high performance centre is built at My State Bank Arena. So the additional two courts are there for community use because we're bursting at the seams.
Agreed.
And they would be, as I indicated, multi-use. So they would be able to have, so they would be drawn up so that they can accommodate netball, basketball, futsal, pickleball. We've used them in the past for dodgeball, volleyball, badminton.
Gymnastics.
There's an echo in here.
Yeah. Okay, so I guess, my broad question is around the ongoing engagement with the other clubs, to make sure that when we ask for 2 more courts, all of the other clubs, do they feel, have they been engaged with about our election wish list, and do they feel like, because I'm sure they have other things that they want too.
So we haven't this time round, because their timeframes have obviously been very condensed with this what I would regard as the snap election. They have been engaged in the past when we've been developing the Kingborough Sports Centre master plan, which is about 3-4 years old now. But that was the iteration before this that I was talking about, was significant funding, and that's 4 years ago. It's probably now 35 million to build, which would have doubled the size of the sports centre and given us 8 courts in total, so going from 4 indoor to 8, which would have made it the largest indoor sports facility in the state. And obviously that plan also involved not just the additional courts, but a whole range of other things that would have allowed extra space for the table tennis, martial arts, that's it, sorry, wrong sport, martial arts, and some of the other ones, lesser known sports that are there. Unfortunately, that is just, seems to be an impossible dream at this point, but I certainly wouldn't be taking it off the agenda for future funding opportunities.
Thank you, Mayor. My last question is around the meeting regarding CTAC with Bill Lawson of Reconciliation Tasmania and Rodney Dillon. Are there any updates you can provide around how we're helping CTAC, or what CTAC would like?
So that was an introductory meeting. Delise Shakuti was there as well, our director in that area. CTAC have expressed a view that they would really like to work with Kingborough Council on a number of issues, and they envisage some partnerships between council and their association. And of course we did talk about cultural burning practices and how we might be able to, there was a strong desire by many of us after we'd been to see the cultural burning activities over on Bruny Island and understood what that could mean to the land, as to how we could get around that. They did indicate that they thought that Huon Valley have engaged them for some cultural burning. And so we're going to follow up how they have got around the insurance issues, which we were seeing as a stumbling block. There is, I'm going to forget the name of it now, but they have some staff who work out of, is it Pakenar Services, who work out of the Antarctic Centre. They've got some offices there, and we have Ms. Shakuti has got in touch with them because I think they have some training. They're a registered training organisation, so we're just trying to sort of proactively now sort of see how we can cement the relationship and work together on some things. Yeah.
Great, thank you.
Any further questions? If not, I will put the recommendation as printed on the screen, moved by Councillor Midgley and seconded by Councillor Gladwright. All those in favour? Against? Motion is carried. Notices of motion. There were no notices of motion, and that takes us now to confirmation of items to be dealt with in closed session, confirmation of minutes, applications for leave of absence, and Kingborough Emergency Services. Looking for a mover and a seconder, please. Moved Councillor Fox, seconded Councillor Gladwright. All those in favour? Against? Motion is carried. So that brings us to the close of the open session of Council. So thank you very much to everyone who has been watching along at home on YouTube. Thank you to our members of the community who are with us in the public gallery tonight. In accordance with the Kingborough Council meetings audio recordings guidelines policy, recording of the open session of the meeting will now cease, and